Hey everyone, it's been so good to connect online. You know, the global pandemic has helped us reach out to each other all across the world. So I want to share a story with you that I have not shared online before. And it's something, sometimes when things are so painful, we react differently. For me, I get really quiet. Like the pain is so deep. I don't want to tell the story because it's painful sharing it. If you can relate, just put a comment below. Things are painful. And so I need to give you some background for you to know the end of the story and the beginning. My husband and I had four beautiful girls. At that time, they were ages 18, 16, 14, and 12. So talk about photogenic. These girls were very articulate, beautiful, joyful, just a joy to be around. And my husband, Wayne, and I began to feel a prompting to adopt. Like, who would adopt when your kids were almost grown? Who would go through the pain of adoption and the difficulties? Well, we just kept feeling that knock on our heart and our spirit. And I know some of you that are coming online, you know our story. You walked with us through the story. So, just shout out. I see you coming on. Well, in the midst of it, we went ahead and we went away to pray because any big decision like that. So Wayne and I went to a lake house that was a part of our church family, and we were fasting, we were praying, and we began to research too, as we would get promptings. So I began to research Brazil because the nation Brazil just kept coming up in my heart and my spirit. And I found some stories online. It hadn't happened just once or twice, but repeatedly, that there were purging events, that there were so many older orphans in Brazil that they were stealing, and the merchants would hire off-duty police officers just to go out and shoot the orphans. And as I began to read about this purging, for several days, I just kept weeping and weeping. And it just broke my heart. And I felt like someone had to do something about it. And no one wants to adopt older children because they've been through so much. But our family joined us up in at the lake house, and it was my four girls and my mom, and we really began to pray about, is God calling us to do that? And I was so proud of the girls. Sarah, the youngest, was the funniest. She waited till all of us responding, and she said, I'm in it, even all the work. My mom was supportive, and we ended up, all of us, traveling to Brazil together as a family. And we adopted two just amazing young men, Alexandre Joel and Ezekiel Paul. We call him Dre and Zeke. Dre was 12 years old, and Zeke was 8 at the time when we adopted them. And it was just such an amazing experience. It was life-changing. Wayne and I stayed for 6 weeks in the culture, and we absolutely loved Brazil. In fact, I think there's some Brazilian friends that I see you coming online. Hi. And there was a church there that really adopted us, and we ended up just being a part of their team. It was so wonderful. We had so many miraculous things happen that confirmed it. But just imagine how difficult this is. At that point, both boys spoke Brazilian. So beginning to communicate, that was tough. But I want you to know those were not the hard burdens or hurdles, because there's a universal language of love. Really, it wasn't until later, when the boys were older. And I didn't say that both boys had been born addicted to drugs. Their biological mom did both, did drugs. And so they were impacted by that, and their comprehension was impacted. And so, you can imagine school, and I served as a principal and pastor at our church academy. And you can imagine I've got 4 beautiful girls, all well-behaved, A students, and then 2 special needs guys that needed extra help. And just get the picture. Oh, and I didn't say that, biracial. And so just get the picture of these guys growing into adulthood, and the style was the pants hanging down. And, nothing was easy. But the hardest part is when they began to experiment with drugs. And it wasn't like experimentation that lots of people do, lots of kids do. It was more like flipping a switch. And as that switch was flipped, it was like they were immediately addicted to drugs. And there was things about attachment disorder and things like that things like weed ended up helping them deal with anxiety and stress. But of course, that gateway drug, there were other things that they began to experiment with. And that became really hard. So we had different times when we moved to Texas. We had different times where in the middle of the night, we either got a call from the police, or we had different things that happened, as a family. We were watching, I think this was Tennessee. We were in the living room watching, and one of my daughters owned a car, and our boys took off in the car, and we didn't know where they were, and they ended up flipping the car. And so, story upon story. And I just want to say, I haven't shared this before because, it's difficult to talk about things. And this is in my past. And I'm so proud of how far the boys have come. So let me catch you up to the present. As we did different types of drug interventions, and as we did interventions with the boys, the process is endless. This is like a 10-year journey. Last October, this is why I haven't tried sharing this before, because it's so painful. I got a call from a coroner, and he asked me if I was the mom of Alexandre Dre. And now Dre, by this time, to catch you up in the story, he's now 23 years old. And Zeke's 20 at this point in the story. And so Dre had been clean from drugs for a long time. And Dre was like a Jesus evangelist. He'd talk about Jesus all the time, but he might be drunk or high, but he'd been clean for a long time. And I've now learned that overdoses are more likely to happen when you've been clean for a long time. And the coroner, as he talked to me, he didn't know exactly what had happened, but it appeared to be a drug overdose. And I was just immediately heartbroken. And after calling my husband, I knew I needed to call Zeke. That they were biological brothers and so close. So I remember calling Zeke, and
we just wept together, and it was so painful. And at that point, it was too painful to share publicly. And even knowing how to do a memorial service. And so we determined to do a memorial in our home with all of our children. And it was Thanksgiving time, and Zeke was there with a friend and all of the family, which you guys know, I've got a lot of kids and grandchildren. And so Zeke was just amazing. I'm so proud of him. But we ended up doing a service at home and a memorial at home, and we planted like a memorial garden for my son. And it's one of my favorite places, and there's so many flowers that are blooming right now. And I'm just so grateful for his life. He had the biggest smile that would just light up his face, and so that was 6 months ago. And then one of the things that has been so helpful, because even though we had been pastors for a long time, we didn't understand the insides of a culture and parents dealing with drugs, and just how hard it is and how much blame you receive as parents from people you don't even know. And so one thing that was a beautiful thing that happened that Thanksgiving when Zeke was here, we had a Thanksgiving banquet at our church. And one of our outreaches, we've just planted the church. We've just moved to this side of town recently. But we began to do meals on Tuesday nights and Sunday mornings. And we have a large overcomers groups and people that have come off of drugs, and a real support group for people dealing with addiction issues. And so Zeke was at the banquet, and people, at this point, we'd only been going like less than 6 months, but people were standing up and talking about their recovery and talking about how thankful they were. And I mean, it was just overwhelming in some ways, just all that God has done. And one of the things that I'm really thankful for, one, I'm thankful for how well Zeke is doing. He's in Austin. I'm proud of him. He's got a faith, and his faith went deeper. And on Mother's Day night, he drove up with his girlfriend and a friend, and we were able to, it had just reopened in Texas, so we were able to actually go to a restaurant together, and it was really good. And every day I hear from Zeke, and either a picture or a video or talk, and this is not easy to talk about. And one of the reasons why I've not shared this story online is I know how people can misconstrue and judge and criticize and blame. But I also realize that there's others out there that you may have your own private stories of pain. Maybe a death that happened, or maybe an adoption that you had a high ideal for and it wasn't what you expected. Or you've had your own struggles with drug culture and addictions, and I'm really sharing it for you because I want you to know that you're not alone. I want you to know that there's support out there. I want you to know that you matter. And at whatever stage, or maybe you're watching this and you've struggled with drugs and it's become a lifestyle for you and you're just not sure how to go on. Well, I just want you to know we're thinking about you, praying for you. I will read each of your comments. I can't do it right now because but just know you're not alone. Whatever battle you're facing, whatever struggle that you've gone through, you're not alone. And there's help, there's hope, and there's a light of overcoming. And the mess that you've gone through can be part of your message. So anyway, I want to hear from you. Let me know how I can pray for you. And we're in it together.